Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Manning. Welcome to the Design for Future webinar. We are suffering some technical difficulties here, which we've gone to a new venue this morning, and for some reason we're struggling with the actual slides. Deepest apologies for that. My suggestion is that I will talk, which will clearly not be as effective as seeing the slides. We will then send you the slides or a link after the webinar, assuming we can't get the technology to work this end. So if you're willing to stay with me, please do so. I do understand that if you decide that you prefer to see the slides as well as see me talk, then or hear me talk, then that's fine. Those people with questions that have put to us beforehand, we guarantee we will respond to those. And if you send us questions either during or after this webinar, we will also give you a full response to those. So welcome to what is not what we had anticipated, and again, apologies. I hope and think, at least based upon the registrations, there are some people out there who are what I would class as old friends, people I've worked with on numerous occasions in the past. So especially welcome to them. I have been involved in supply chain transformations of many forms, both as a practitioner and as a consultant and a support for more than 35 years. And I think I'm not the only one. I think all of you will recognise that any form of transformation is always been stated as clearly is highly dependent upon leadership. And I think that's never changed, and I think it still is true today. There are a number of best practice models for supply chain, quite famously originating with the Oliver Wight proven path and Oliver Wight so-called plumbing chart. But those models from a supply chain perspective will take us broadly top to bottom and side to side. They will take us down from a vision and a strategy down through the execution of that strategy. And it's that place, the execution of strategy, that I see the existence of what was sales and operations planning, but now integrated business planning, right down through to the execution, where we see product management, demand management, and supply chain management. That's not an unusual model, although I do believe that integrated business planning, as it is so called today, is an evolution of what S&OP has done for us in the past. It is much more strategic, at least from a strategic execution perspective. It is much broader, embracing product development. And I think more recently, embracing people development, and indeed scenario planning. I think lots of people talk about scenario planning in terms of what if, but I think it has tended to be, what are we going to do now? This has happened. I believe the future of IDP, I believe the future of IDP will, hence saying we set that vision, we have a more executional process lower down from a product, demand and supply chain perspective, which is the execution from side to side of my supply chain. Underpinning that model, we can plan anything. We can plan an efficient supply chain, and we can plan an inefficient supply chain. So the concepts of continuous improvement need to underpin that process so that we're planning the most effective and lean supply chain we can. As we just said, people are a key to this, people and change management. They always have been, and that's going to be a subject later in this webinar. People respond to the understanding of why and understanding of the KPIs by which they're driven. As we know, if you are measured irrationally, you behave irrationally. And then underpinning the whole thing is data. So what you see in front of you, we're hoping, is that overall business excellence model that is not particularly different than what we've seen before, but the key words on there are integration. The gap in the middle is where the integrated business planning process fits. So we see that as the link between execution and vision stroke strategy, and focused upon the gap closing exercise. So that model in front of you again is not new, it's an evolution of S&OP which has been around for many years. The differences in this one are the inclusion of that people development review, the inclusion of scenario planning, and as I've started to say, scenario planning is not what are we going to do now this has happened, but what are we going to do if this happens. It also embraces a bit of a catch-all, which is the project management office. In other words, the other projects, the other activities that are impacting our business significantly. So it is a totally integrated model, going from execution, or going from strategy down to execution. Business models are evolving all the time. Process models are evolving all the time, and what you're seeing is our version of that. However, what about this missing piece that we've always talked about in terms of leadership? So is leadership something that we are born with, or is leadership that we can be developed? My argument throughout this webinar will be that it is indeed something that we can develop, and indeed have to develop if we are to be successful in the transformation implied on the previous slide. Part of those slides is to focus upon what we call the gap. So IBP is looking out over a 24-month period. The outcome of that IBP process each month is telling us what do we think will happen. Now, what do we think will happen is what we describe as truth as we know it. That tends to be a bottom-up process. On top of that, however, the strategic planning process and indeed the visioning process and the annual operating planning process are top-down. They are saying, what would we like to happen? What do we want to happen? In other words, they're ambitious processes, setting ambition for our organisation. A little bit like you say to your kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? So those things are saying, what do we want to be when we grow up? If what we think will happen is the same as what we want to happen, then we're in great shape. However, very frequently, in fact I would argue always, there will be a gap between those two things. And the role of the future IBP and supply chain processes is to identify that gap and do something about them, close them. Hence the focus of IBP is long term. Because if we see that gap in the last month of the year, for example, there is precious little we can do about it. If we see that gap 18 months ahead, there's an awful lot more we can do about it. When I say gap, it could be a financial gap, it could be a capacity gap, it could be a product gap, it could be a resources gap, and it could be a people gap. And indeed, our view is why we've included the extra people review in that IBP process is that the development and attraction and retention of talent is going to be one of the key business issues for our futures. For those in Europe and indeed the UK, good only knows what Brexit will do to that issue, but it will certainly play its part, and I suspect not a positive part. So, in terms of our focus is the integration of those people, processes and systems. The space we want to be in is in the intersection of those areas, something that we lovingly refer to as the sweet spot. Now, we all know systems are there to be developed, and the technology today is infinitely greater than it ever was, more successful than it ever was, more functional than it ever was. Processes, as I've just shown, the IBP process has evolved from a much simpler S&OP process back in the 80s. However, it's the people side of this. So until we get that integration, that sweet spot, which includes people and the impact of leadership in those areas, then we can have the best systems in the world, we can have the best processes in the world, but we'll never be highly competitive. Now, I know I've stolen the phrase sweet spot from sport, If you hear a golf player, for example, use that word, you know, I hit the sweet spot that time, then what that means is they got their swing just right, they middle the ball, they got their weight on the right foot, they got maximum power and maximum direction in the shot. Very competitive. You know, the difference between myself and let's say Tiger Woods would be, I comment when I hit the sweet spot. Tiger Woods comments when he doesn't. I have played with a shot at him. I remember doing it. It was 1982. The difference, of course, is that he plays it 68 times around. That's why he's world class, and I am far from it. That is exactly the same on supply chain of the future. Supply chain of the future needs to allow us to be world class, which will absolutely rely upon excellent systems, best in practice, best in class processes, and people that have a different and more integrated behavior than we have today. This is not about just management. So taking a slide from John Anderson, who was recognized as the Burger King turnaround man prior to his Citicorp job, some of his statements about the difference between leadership and management. Now, management gives you a position, not leadership. You don't need a position to be a leader. You need to behave in a particular way. People don't want a boss. In fact, you could argue they don't even like a boss, which of course spelled backwards is double SOB. People want and seek leadership. Leaders are not moody. Leaders are consistent. Leaders are not arrogant. People trust them. In fact, one of our focus is we have a phrase and an objective of creating what we call secure-based leadership. That's a different style and similar to what other people will call distributed leadership. What that really means is that people trust that the leader has got their back. In fact, that phraseology, secure-based leadership, comes from rock climbing, where the guy with the rope at the bottom will allow the climber to take his own line, will allow the climber to make a mistake, even allow the climber to fall off, but will not allow the climber to die. In other words, the leader, the guy at the bottom of with the rope, has got the guy's back. So leaders seize the moment to recognize opportunity, big opportunity, listen to people but make decisions, not always seek consensus. There's an awful lot that John Anderson says there that I think resonate very closely to my own views. Another significant leader of our time is of course Richard Branson, who very much has people at the forefront of the process. Take care of your employees and they'll take care of your business. It's as simple as that. Engaged employees are your top competitive advantage. So we talk about technology, we talk about supply chain process, but if we do not have that engaged set of people who buy into the why we're doing this, not just the how, but the why, that's a very different thing, then competitiveness will not exist. So people, in our view, respond to leadership. They respond to vision, target, and what we call impeccable behavior. Impeccable behavior goes back to the leader must be consistent. The leader must be visually trustworthy. The leader must behave exactly how they are expected to behave and not be moody. Of course, vision, in other words, the created future, can be a very powerful driver. A number of the works that I've studied over the years include a very famous book by an author called Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is all about the vision of the future and how powerful it can be in making decisions both large and small. One of his statements was, one of his quotes was, man cannot live without having something significant to do in his future. And of course, that is saying I'm setting a very high-level vision. That, however, needs to be documented into what we call an extended vision. And then we need to ensure, once again, we have the capability and skills In other words, the people skills to be able to deliver. Famously, of course, back in the 80s, Peter Drucker put together a little cartoon, which I particularly like. A story I'm sure many of you will remember. 3 stonecutters cutting rocks. Why are you cutting stones? First one, because I need the money. It's a job, 9 to 5. Second one, because I'm a good stonecutter. I'm particularly good at this. I like doing it. Third one, because I'm building a cathedral. Now, I ask you, which one of these stonecutters is the most engaged? Which one will deliver the best performance? Which one will make us most competitive? And I strongly argue that the answer to that question will be the third one. So how top management behave and then what they really believe about people and how they treat them will, to a large extent, determine how well the company will perform in the future. So if we want a supply chain that performs highly competitively in the future, yes, we have to have good process, best practice process, innovative process. Yes, we have to have the right technology and systems to support it. But without the right people who are engaged in the understanding of why we're working in this way and the vision of our future, then the first 2 things will largely be for nothing, despite the fact the first 2 things will cost us a lot of money to get. So we'll spend the money and not get the results and the desired future that we are looking for. So again, from a survey a few years ago, some differences here between manager and leader. I'm not going to go down each of these. What I'd like to do is highlight one in particular, which is sort of in the middle there, where the manager asks how and when, the leader asks why. Now, why that's so significant is that understanding the why is what drives all of our behavior and decision making. So people do not change, people do not develop, people do not do things because they know how to do something. An illustration I've used for years in this area would be, I happen to live near a city in the UK here called Chester. That could be, this story could come from any city in the world. But in Chester there is a park, it's a very nice place. There is lawns and rose beds and flower beds, etc. If you walk around that park, you'll find signs on the grass that says, no ball games on the grass. I ask you, what do you see people doing? Well, of course, what you see people doing, you see kids playing football on the grass, often using the sign as a goalpost, with their parents sat on a park bench watching. Now, the question for me is, why is that happening? Is it because those parents can't read? And again, I put to you that it's not because those parents can't read. Those parents were trained how to read several years ago. What they don't get is the why. And because they don't get the why, they come up with all sorts of reasons like, what a stupid rule that is, kids have got to play somewhere. Now, if on the other hand, the sign had said, no ball games on the grass because there's poisonous snakes in it, then I suspect there might be a very different result. Now, kids do need to play football. So now I think what would happen is parent would say, you can't play there, you have to play over there. And the change has not come about because they read the sign. The change has come about because they understood the why. Now, of course, to understand the why, you have to read the sign as well. So it's not a question of either or, but it is a question of both. And I think what the leader needs to focus on is the why. Why are we doing this? What is our purpose? What is driving us as compared to how are we going to do it? Because how we're going to do it is going to evolve, just like how we used to do SOP is very different to how we do IBP today. It has the same principles, but actually at its heart, it has the same why. And the same why is from a gap closure perspective. So this is all about communication. And a very interesting fact is that 93% of communication, human communication, is non-verbal. We communicate all day, every day, even if we don't realize it. How we listen,
what we say, how we say it, how we don't say it, our body language, what we do, what we don't do, when and how often we do all of the above, and where we do it. Do we do it at lunch? Do we do it on email? Do we throw away lines on the plane at home? So communication is at the heart of this, and I ask you to think about, if 7% is verbal and 93% is non-verbal, how important is the non-verbal element of this? And I would argue extremely important. This ties back to the impeccable behaviour. It's not what you say, it's how you behave. It is really the communication tool that we have. And we in DMI have a sister organisation that actually focuses on the development of leadership and is very focused upon non-verbal communication. And the way we illustrate that non-verbal communication is through a leadership development technique based upon equine-assisted learning. I'm going to show you a short video here of one of those clients talking about that leadership.
I did have some expectations. I've been on leadership development courses before. They were okay, but it was definitely not very related to me. It was more about relating to how to get other people to do things, but not about yourself and how you can have an impact positively or negatively. I came in thinking, is this going to help me change other people? Because I thought I'd done what I could have done to get a team together or a reaction or to lead a team, but it's made me think more about me and how even the simplest form of body language or look or whatever I say can have a major impact on how it affects other people, and the subconscious side of the vibes that you can give off. That's been a real revelation. Definitely made me think that the persona I think I give off is not the persona that can be perceived. I need to think about myself to change before I can get other people around me to change. This is the most unique course that I've been on, and it's a course that's made me think more about myself. It's made me think about what you need to be a good leader, not just from myself, but also the leaders around me, or peers that work alongside me. And if you come with an open mind, I think you'll go away with lots of questions, lots of thoughts. But I think if you really open up and go with the course, you can come away a better person. I feel really engaged. I feel I've got to go away and think about some things that I need to do, but I definitely feel more positive that by making some small changes, I can make a bigger difference to the people that I work with, the people in my team, and the people across the business.
So I hope you found that interesting. There's an old phrase, isn't there, that there's people talk about there is no I in team. Well, actually, if you listen to what Mike was saying there, the team is all about I. It's not about I in the sense of I instead of the team, but he was talking there about how his own behaviour was so influential, and his own non-verbal behaviour was so influential in working with other people in a team. I think that's a different angle on things, but I think it's a very interesting angle on things. We can only change ourselves. We cannot change other people. But in order to change ourselves, we have to understand the impact we have on other people. And that's what really Mike is saying there about the non-verbal communication. And he mentioned the word I many times in that very short little video. But he wasn't doing it in a negative way, in my opinion. He was doing it in a very positive way in terms of his part in being either the leader of that team or a member of that team. So in the idea of distributed leadership, or as we call it, secure base, we think everybody in the organization has a responsibility to act as a leader, whether that be the leader of the company, whether that be the leader of the function or a team, or even themselves.
or even at home, the leader of a sports team, or even the leader of a family. That role of communication and leadership is fundamental to all aspects of human life. Even the way actually we portray the organisation structure, I think, says so much. Typically, we will display it as per the left-hand diagram, won't we? There will be a leader at the top who will cascade decisions and approaches and direction throughout the organisation. Actually, if you just simply draw that the opposite way around, what you're saying is the leader, whether it be of the company, whether it be of the team, whether it be of the function, is not the person who is there to do things. The leader is there to support other people doing things. One of the greatest leaders I ever worked with was a guy called Gottfried Thoma. He was the managing director of several big tobacco businesses I worked in around the world. And I remember him saying to me one time, he didn't know anything about the cigarette industry. Well, that wasn't true. He knew a great deal. But what he then said was his job was simply to surround himself by the right people and inspire them to do great things. That's what he saw his role. And then years later, quite recently actually, I read a book by a guy called David Marquardt, who wrote a book. He was a captain of a US submarine, and he wrote a book called Turn the Ship Around. His whole message there was the same. His whole message was, typically in the military especially, but actually in many organizations, the leader is there to tell people what to do. So Marquardt uses the example of saying, I would previously have said to the periscope operator or officer, officer, please up periscope. What he eventually got is everybody in the organization, in other words on the ship, to make the decisions for him and say, I don't want me to tell you to do that. What I want you to do is to say, Captain, I am about to up periscope. If I do not tell you not to do that because you're going to kill us all, then you carry on. You have made that decision. You are leading the periscope operation. That is secure base leadership. My job, he said, was to make sure we don't die, not to tell you to up periscope at the appropriate time. I think it's a very different way of thinking, but I believe a very, very important way of thinking. Another person who I've studied a great deal is Joel Barker. And one of his phrases here is, vision without action is just dreaming. Action with vision without vision is past the time. Vision with action can change the world. And I feel very passionately about this, that my vision, supported by actual behavior and action, will indeed create big and great things. So, final sort of points here, guys, and apologies for the difficulty of the technology, which hasn't made things very easy for us, but a desk is a dangerous place from which to see the world. And the other thing that I've come across recently is, this is all about people. You can't run a company on PowerPoint. You have to run the company based upon communication, and PowerPoint certainly is not a very good communication tool. Behavior, 93% of which non-verbal, behavior is a far more powerful communication tool than any PowerPoint or Excel spreadsheet. So, thank you very much for that, and apologies deeply for the difficulty in technology. I hope it hasn't spoiled things too much. We did have a number of questions that were sent in to us, and we will guarantee that we will get answers back to all of those people in writing. Has anybody got anything that they would like to ask at this point? So it appears as though either there is nobody there, or there are certainly no questions. Okay, in fact, there isn't nobody there. There's 28 of you out there, apparently. So thank you for sticking with it, by the way. I do recognise that it has been difficult. A couple of questions. A couple of questions that have already been put forward, one from a gentleman called Paul Kelly. Will technology be the biggest disruptor? If yes, how do we prepare? I think over time, technology has change many things. The pace of technology change in the past 100 years has been amazing. In fact, if I look back to the last century, I believe the biggest change in the world was indeed mass production. Yes, technology in terms of IT has made a big difference in the latter part of the century and the early part of this century. But yes, there have been some very significant changes. My view is that technology will be a change element for the future, but the biggest change will be the ability to develop and communicate with people. So I hope that helps, Paul, but I will give you a more full answer. Okay, so Alexander Mayer, who welcome Alexander. Alex is one of my very old friends. So other companies have lawyers in their organisation. Sorry, layers in their organisation. Will layers with different focus, long and short term, how do you overcome this? I think there needs to be clear accountabilities. There needs to be a clear focus. But whether I'm working short term, whether I'm working medium term, whether I'm working long term, then I always need to have a clear understanding of my purpose, of why we're doing this, and my vision. In other words, go back to the Peter Drucker cartoon. The guy cutting stones there, very short-term focus. He was cutting 10 stones today and laying them. However, he was doing it most effectively, or the one that was doing it most effectively was the one with the clear vision of why he was doing that. In other words, building a cathedral. So I don't think layers or functions or roles actually make very much difference in terms of whether we need to have the appropriate type of communication, then go back to the non-verbal statements, and a clear vision of what our future supply chain and business should look like. Again, Alex, it's great to see you, but I hope, or hear from you, but I hope that has been, hopeful. Yeah, good. Okay, so an interesting question from Les Gerber, who again I hope is on the line. What is the value for companies to move from traditional S&OP to IBP? How will planning systems need to adapt to the future state of supply chains, relying more on predictive forecast analysis? So the value of moving, I think, from traditional S&OP to IBP is that things evolve. We've had our little technology problem is in a city called Nantwich in the UK. Nantwich is where Rolls-Royce cars used to be, and indeed Rolls-Royce cars is where I first learned my trade. I remember going on the very first S&OP course ever conducted in the UK. It was in Nantwich, and the reason for that is Rolls-Royce sent a lot of people on it, and it was in 1983. Now, if I think back to the messages in 1983 about S&OP, I compare them to the messages that we now talk about in terms of IBP, they are significantly not different, but evolved. Back in 83, S&OP was simply about balancing supply and demand, almost as it says on the tin. Today, the key word in integrated business planning is integrated. Yes, it still is about developing a balance between supply and demand, but it's also about introducing new products and services in a very integrated and smooth manner. Back in 83, new product introduction was not mentioned. What makes the world go round is money. And therefore, we talk about a financial forecast, and I would argue there is no such thing as a financial forecast because you don't make nor sell money. You make and sell product, or you make and sell service, or provide and sell service. The money is a consequence. So the integration of financial planning with the overall IBP process is very different than SNOP was back in '83. And finally, strategic, well, not finally really, but strategic execution and scenario planning, not a mention back in '83. The world is changing very rapidly. Good grief, we're living through Brexit right now. The need for scenario planning, the need for strategic execution is infinitely greater. Perhaps it isn't, but certainly seen as infinitely greater than it was in '83. IBP is picking up all of those things. SNOP did not. And frankly, I'm quite proud. If I was to be sat here saying to you, what I'm describing from Nantwich in 2019 is exactly the same as I learned in Nantwich back in 1983. Oh, by the way, I believe in continuous improvement. There would be somewhat of a contradiction in terms in there. Has the world not changed in the past 40 years? Have we not learned more about what's important in the past 40 years? Is the world not infinitely more competitive than it was back in the 80s? I think the answer to all those questions is yes. And so I think it isn't a question of what's the benefit. I think the question is you have to, otherwise you will be left behind. I hope that helps. I'll answer the second part of that question more fully. So there is another question from Chris Buckle. Again, I hope Chris is on the phone. Jackson's are somebody who I've had some contact with in the past, so yeah, welcome. Question, do you see more cross-company collaboration in the future in order to drive down costs? Very simple answer to that, Chris, is yes, I do. I think supply chain integration does not just include ourselves, it includes our customers, it includes our suppliers, it includes maybe even our competitors. So I think a simple answer is yes, I do see more collaboration. Collaboration, of course, is not a systems thing particularly. It's not even a process thing particularly. It's a human thing. Once again, you tie it right back into okay, so if we're going to collaborate, we better trust each other. We better have leadership across now just not ourselves, but across all of the nodes or elements of that collaboration. So if we're going to go down a collaborative route, which I think is inevitable, then once again, the importance of people development, which will now be across more than one organization, is simply greater than it used to be. So again, I loop back around, Chris, and say, yes, I do see that. I hope that helps. It would appear that we don't have any other questions. We still have 27 attendees online, so hopefully, if you have anything, please fire it at us. If not, we will make sure that we send you the links to this presentation. Again, I do hope sincerely that the technology issues we suffered to begin with haven't detracted from your enjoyment and from the benefit you've taken from this session. So finally, thank you very much for registering. Thank you very much for joining us. One last chance for any questions. Not arrived. That's okay. Not a problem. We will, as I say, send you the link. We'll answer the questions that we have had previously in full. And we look forward to hopefully you joining us on another occasion when hopefully we won't have the technology issues we've just had. If you have any other interest, clearly you can go to either the website of DMI, which will point you towards the website of a company called Horses for Change, and that's the organisation, the sister company that focuses predominantly on the leadership development side. There is, I think we've just put up a slide that's shown the other things we do as part of the DMI Horses for Change group. Finally, thank you very much for joining us. Have a good day.